Okay, so after my history with survival horror games uh, was done, I was pretty happy about it, how it turned out to be, but then so many games were left out from that video that I would have liked to talk about and remember talking about those. So I decided to make this a kind of bonus video. This will not be as long as the main video, but yeah, mainly again I will be focusing on PlayStation 1 era survival horror games that I didn't mention or I just forgot to talk about, and also a little bit I will be covering two Silent Hill games that I didn't talk about: Silent Hill 5 Homecoming and Silent Hill 6 Downpour from the PlayStation 3 days. So let's see how this goes and how many games I will remember this time. But yeah, this will mainly focus on PlayStation 1 era because I've played so freaking many survival horror slash horror games on PlayStation 1 back in the day. So much more than on any other platform, for sure. So yeah, and first of all I would want to just clarify why I didn't talk about Shadow Man games. Is that of course I made a whole video about my history with Shadow Man 2, Shadow Man 1 and 2. So it was kind of pointless to, again talk about those because I made a, specific video on that topic. And also, I don't count Shadow Man games as survival horror games. Sure, they have survival horror maybe elements, but they are just action adventures with horror elements and horror theme. So yeah, that's out of the way. just those who were wondering why I didn't mention Shadow Man games. That's why. So yeah, about the games that I would have really liked to talk about on the first video that I didn't were two very precious games for me. Specifically, the sequel were two survival horror. I mean, more like, okay, they are count as survival horror games, and in my opinion, I think those as survival horror games, but they are more focused on just hack and slash style gameplay, and they are Nightmare Creatures 1 and 2. So especially sequel Nightmare Creatures 2 is fucking awesome game. I have so many fond memories with that game. But also the first one was really good, but just fucking hard as hell. Especially the first game. So I admit I never completed it without cheating codes because the game is so fucking hard, and in some places kinda unfair because the gameplay wasn't that good, you know. There were so many instant kills in, and you got lives in that game. So once you run out of lives, it was game over. And there wasn't, and one thing, there wasn't, if I remember right, any checkpoints during the levels. So if you died, you would have to restart the whole level, and some levels were just long ass levels. So I prefer the sequel. The sequel is much better, in my opinion, and it's not that unfair. It's much more fair, and it's a little bit easier. It's still not easy, but it's easier than the first game. Yeah, I just love the atmosphere and mood. Just atmosphere, music, levels. Okay, the levels could be, especially in the second game, are too dark sometimes that you can't see a fucking thing. But yeah, I love the gothic horror theme in those games. It's just perfect for me. So yeah, Nightmare Creatures, especially the sequel, is very, very dear to me. So definitely a big part of the PlayStation 1 survival horror history for me. Then there were a game called Galerians, which I also loved. It was very different. There were no weapons. The combat you used was your mind. You kind of telepathically attacked enemies. I would say it was a little bit like a psychological survival horror game, but not in the same way as Silent Hill games. But there was definitely a little bit psychological side to the story, and the shit like that. But the game was hard again for me, especially the later levels and later stages were just brutally hard. But yeah, I really enjoyed the game. It was fresh, it was different from the gun combat focused survival horror games like Resident Evil, Silent Hill, Dino Crisis, Alone in the Dark. So this time you didn't use weapons, you used your mind as a attacking weapon. Then there were a game called, it was a kind of role-playing game slash survival horror named Kudelka. The combat was very different. It used the pre-rendered background when you were exploring the levels, but once there were randomly generated enemy encounters, and once you encountered those invisible enemies, the combat system was turn-based, really familiar with role-playing games like Final Fantasy and other big role-playing game series. So it had a turn-based combat system, which I was not so big fan of, but yeah, the Kudelka had a really good atmosphere. It had many different, of course you controlled only one character the female character, the young witch named Kudelka. But there were, I think, 2 or 3 other characters you controlled during combat. But yeah, also I never finished the game, but I have seen it from the start to finish as a Let's Play game, or was it just walkthrough on YouTube? I can't remember. But anyway, I was so curious still to see how it ends, because I never completed it. It was just too hard, you know, the combat. Some bosses were actually fucking brutal, and there was one boss I was never able to beat, so I just gave up playing. Then there was a game called Countdown Vampires, which at that time I was really looking forward to that game. I was really excited about it, but in the end it never came to Europe. It was only released in Japan and US, so I was kind of pissed, but you know, the game turned out to be quite poor. I know some fans like it, but and it's definitely what I have seen, and again, like in Kudelka, I've seen the walkthrough or Let's Play, you know, from the start to finish, and I think it's not that bad. I mean, of course, just seeing someone else play, you don't really know how good the controls are, but you know, it looked nice, sounded nice, the atmosphere was, I think, great. And yeah, I would have really liked to play that game, but yeah, I was very disappointed that it never came to Europe, so yeah, that was a big bummer. I'm trying to think about the PlayStation 2 horror games that I didn't mention or forgot to talk about. I just can't remember that many from the PlayStation 2 era. There must have been, you know, more than just Resident Evil games, Silent Hill game. Well, Resident Evil, Code Veronica. Of course, there were some spin-off Resident Evil games on PlayStation 2, like Outbreak games and Dead Aim, which was, I think it was just horrible. Dead Aim, Resident Evil Dead Aim. But yeah, also I will little bit talk about the PlayStation 1 Resident Evil spin-off. Resident Evil Survivor. I think that was actually pretty fun and entertaining game. Sure, it was kind of low budget, kind of low quality compared to the, of course, main game series Resident Evil on PS1. It was definitely not on par with those games, but yeah, it was fun, very short game, kind of light gun game, and I remember I bought a light gun for that game, for only for that game. Of course, I had Time Crisis game on PlayStation 1, if I remember, yeah, but which I was able to use the light gun, but it was really fun using the light gun. Of course, you could play it with the controller, DualShock, but it was definitely more fun with the light gun. So that was fun, very short game, especially playing with the light gun. But yeah, I just really can't remember that many PlayStation 2. Of course, I covered Project Zero / Fatal Frame games, the first 3 on PlayStation 2 in my first video, but yeah, sure, I will forget some games even in this video, but I'm not doing a third video on this topic, so this will be the bonus video and that's it, then I'm finished with this topic. So if I forget something, then I forget something. But yeah, PlayStation 3 era. Let's little bit talk about Silent Hill 5 Homecoming. So after the PlayStation 1 and 2 games, Team Silent wasn't anymore responsible. They did the first 4 games, but then some, I can't remember, but some US based dev team made Homecoming, and among the fans that game is really poorly received. Many fans hate that game. I don't actually. I think it has some very good moments in the game. Its weakest point is definitely a combat, because it was kind of lackluster and just clunky. The combat wasn't nearly as good as on the, say, first 3 games. The room combat was a little bit sluggish also, but yeah. But the atmosphere, the levels, especially the sound, sounds and music, that little music that it had. But yeah, the sound quality on Homecoming was really good. And the story was, I think, the main strength of that game. I really loved the story. It was so well written. One of the best stories in Silent Hill games for me. And also some boss fights were just fucking horrible in a good way, The bosses itself were scary fucking monsters. Definitely the scariest bosses on the Silent Hill series are probably on Homecoming. So overall, a really good Silent Hill game. Actually, I prefer Silent Hill 5 over Silent Hill 4. Of course, the first 3 are better, but Silent Hill Homecoming to me is better than Silent Hill The Room. But then Silent Hill Downpour, that was just bad for me. I can't really think of many good things to say about that game. Maybe again the story was pretty nicely written. Yeah, the story was pretty nicely done, interesting story. but just the setting and oh my god, the combat was much worse than already a quite poor combat on Silent Hill Homecoming. Downpour's combat was just abysmal to me. Like, yeah, it's been 10 years the last time I played it, back when it was new, but yeah, that's definitely, in my opinion, the worst Silent Hill game, Downpour. Only the story carried it, you know, somewhat, but any other elements were just poor. Okay, it had some kind of semi-open world mechanic to it. Some may had, you know, enjoyed that aspect, but I just didn't. I think it was just, you know, the game was just artificially lengthening its lifespan. You know, the game was much longer than it should have been in the first place. You know, so much backtracking. It just, you know, it was just getting very boring very fast for me. Of course I completed the game, but yeah, I would say honestly I just played it through because of its story, period. Okay, so what really else? Before this video I little bit, just a little bit, I was prepared what games I wanna talk about, and yeah, I just want the games I just talked about. They were just, you know, games that I would have liked to, you know, talk about in the first video. So they were that important that I wanted to do another video where I could talk about those missing games from the first video. But and of course a little bit about the, you know, current state of survival horror. I bought Callisto Protocol. That's a kind of Dead Space like a spiritual successor to Dead Space. I haven't really played it yet, so I can't talk about that yet. I have plans to start it very soon, but yeah, I just haven't yet. I'm missing the mood to, you know, playing that game. I just have to be on the right mindset to play it, and right now I just kind of want to play pick up and play easier games like NHL and FIFA sport games and some racing games. But anyway, Callisto Protocol, I had to buy it, and also in a couple of days Dead Space remake will be out. But personally, because I bought Callisto Protocol, I'm probably not going to buy Dead Space remake, because okay, let's talk about a little bit about that. So it's described as a remake, But this is a little bit problematic for me because the things I've seen from Dead Space remake, it just, to me, remake means there are, you know, new stuff introduced, new things. It's not just the same freaking game on better graphics and whatnot. And of course, I don't know if I think there will be some new things to the Dead Space remake, but what I've seen so far, to me it looks more like a remaster. You know, it looks too familiar. Like all I've seen are, you know, familiar moments and scenes from the original Dead Space. So that's why I'm not so. Of course, I love it, Dead Space 1 and 2, very much. But yeah, I'm not just that excited and curious about the Dead Space remake. I may get it on discount later, but yeah, let's see if I will or not. But yeah, like initially I'm not that excited. I will not buy it day one. So yeah, at least I was able to talk about some of the games. I forgot to talk about initially in the first video, but yeah, this is it. Still a little less than half an hour just talking about a couple of games. The time flies so fast, so it's still not that. This video turned out to be quite long in the end. I was maybe thinking about making a 15 to 20 minute video, but here we are, almost half an hour. But anyway, this is it, my bonus video on the topic of my history with survival horror games. See you in the next video, whatever it is. Bye.